Good afternoon, Sanbanani. In our language, we say Dumelang. My name is Kaene Disepo. I'm the founder of a social enterprise called Change Africa. I think first, allow me to really begin by doing the one thing actually that a provocateur is paid to do, being slightly ungrateful for the question that I have been lended. We've been asked to discuss the digital futures of African philanthropy. And I think, in as much as it's such a great topic, I would like to refuse some of the assertions that have been made and perhaps assumptions, not because they're wrong, but because they smuggle two assumptions into this room that I'm not really willing to let pass unchallenged. I think the first is that philanthropy is the right word for what Africa actually does. The second is that digital is a direction of travel around and also a road that by definition leads somewhere we want to go. Now, let me take the first word. Philanthropy, I think for me, in many ways, is a borrowed container. When we say philanthropy, we're actually reaching for a northern category, the lone benefactor, the foundation, the gift that flows downward from those who have to those who have not. And then we congratulate ourselves for being warmer, more communal, more, in our word, we say boto or ubuntu, inside actually someone else's box. But let's look closely at what we actually do. So, for example, a burial society is not really a charity, it is an insurance. A motelo or a stokvel is not generosity. It is a contract with members, with rules and consequences for the ones who do not pay. In Botswana, we have something called 𝐊𝐚𝐿𝐴, which was really mutual aid with a lot of calloused hands. The whole village would arrive to plow one's family field on the understanding that the next season, the field would be yours. And we also have another thing called mafisa, where with mafisa is the one that I really want to maybe stress a little bit here. Our grandparents understood that you could actually loan a man your cattle so that his children could drink the milk and his plow could break the soil, while the head itself actually remained yours. And remained, in fact, was a relationship rather than a transaction. So now, my question is, which donor platform understands Mafisa? Which giving app actually knows the difference between transferring a cow and actually lending one? So here is my first provocation. I assert that solidarity is horizontal and clarity is vertical. And much of what we are calling the digitization of African philanthropy is actually the quiet work of tilting the first into the second, taking systems that made us unanswerable to each other and rebuilding them so that we are answerable upward to a donor, to a dashboard, to a definition of impact written somewhere we have never been. On whether the tools are locally built or imported, that is a trap. And in many ways, I don't want to step in it. I know that we're going to be tempted to spend an hour debating whether our platforms are African made or borrowed. In my honest opinion, it is a wrong fight. The interface may well be local, the rails are rarely are. A Gaborone giving platform can still run on foreign cloud, foreign payment infrastructure, foreign donor management software, and most definitely, or most actually decisively, foreign capital arriving with foreign reporting requirements attached. So sovereignty, in many ways, was never a question of who designed the app. It is a question of who owns the donor relationship and who actually owns the data. And by that measure, most of what we proudly call African platforms are translation layers, machines for making African giving legible to Northern funders. In many ways, that is actually not a tool of autonomy. That, I'm afraid, is a better leash. When the giving is African, but the dashboard reports to DC, to Delaware, to Paris, we should at least be honest about the beneficiary, about who the beneficiary is actually answering to. The dependency question, and I want to be careful here because I do this work quite a lot. I spend a great deal of my time inside monitoring and evaluation for projects. One of the leading projects that we have at Change Africa is actually called C-Suite, where we convene executive networking platforms, where we have ministers, private secretaries, CEOs, heads of international organizations, and we discuss what is called the C-Suite Legacy Blueprint, where essentially we craft legacy projects by answering one fundamental question. In 200 years, what is the name and how would you like to be remembered? So inside that very architecture lies accountability. But let me indict my own profession here before anyone else does. The dependency that should frighten us is actually not dependency on technology. It is a dependency on measurement regimes. Every dashboard, every theory of change, every impact metric is a quiet instrument for making African work answerable to someone else's idea of what counts. We did not digitize philanthropy. We digitized the audit. And notice, the accountability only ever runs in one direction. And we've had this conversation so many times. That is the grantee who reports to the funder. The small reports to the large. The near reports to the distant. So where is the platform that rates the foundation? Where is the dashboard on which a village actually scores a donor? Where is the log frame that holds a program officer, say in Geneva, accountable to a grandmother, say in 𝐏𝐫𝐨𝐯𝐶? It does not exist. And its non-existence is not an oversight. The asymmetry is the product. Now, let me give you the number one number that should reorganize this entire conversation. While we sit here asking how formal philanthropy might learn from the diaspora and from mutual aid, the diaspora has already built the largest digital giving infrastructure on this continent, and it owes our sector nothing. Remittances to Africa reached roughly $100 billion in 2025, close to 6% of the continent's GDP, and actually surpassing official development assistance, which sat near $42 billion and outpacing most foreign direct investment. And unlike aid, which bends to the political weather of donor capitals, and I think we all know because we have watched since 2025, when a stroke of an American pen sent tremors through every development office on this continent. It is the remittances that did not flinch. They held steady through the pandemic. They held steady through the cuts. The diaspora did not wait for a convening. It did not commission a log frame. It needed a phone number and a reason. Harambee was crowdfunding before Silicon Valley discovered actually the word. We did not lack the technology of solidarity. We lacked the patience to be left alone with it. So when formal philanthropy says it wants to learn from mutual aid, let us name the posture precisely. It is the anthropologist studying the tribe, wanting to extract the mechanism, the trust, the velocity, while keeping the power. That, I'm afraid, is not learning. That is enclosure. And now let me bring this home, because Botswana has already lived the parable we are too polite to name. This country built its entire identity on one refusal. We refuse to export our diamonds raw. Some point or another. We insisted against London, against the weight of a century, that the stones be sorted, cut, and actually polished here on our soil. by our hands. We called it beneficiation. We made it a national doctrine. So I will ask in this room, the only question I truly came to ask, have we beneficiated our generosity? Or are we simply still exporting it raw? Shipping out our solidarity to be packaged abroad, measured abroad, branded abroad, and sold back to us as best practice at a premium. Say it again. Have we beneficiated our generosity, or are we still exporting it wrong? Shipping out our solidarity to be packaged abroad, measured abroad, branded abroad, and sold back to us as best practice at a premium. Because here is the pattern, stated plainly: money that arrives free but with conditions, money that distorts local incentives, money that hollows out the accountability between a leader and the people he serves and replaces it with accountability to a distant office, money that makes the local answerable to the foreign. We already have a name for that pattern on this continent. We call it the resource curse. I'm simply suggesting that philanthropy can be a resource curse too, and that digital philanthropy may be its most efficient, most frictionless, most polite version yet. On young people and technology, I don't really expect to end on the easy hope. We will be tempted to close with a warm note about young Africans using their phones to mobilize resources and demand accountability. And in many ways, that is actually true. But hear the other half of the sentence. The very tools that let a young person raise money also let a funder surveil them. The very dashboards we celebrate as transparency overwhelmingly discipline the small actor and leave the large one untouched. So young Africans, they're actually not short of digital tools to raise money. We are drowning in them. We are simply short of power. The power to set the terms on which the money arrives, the power to define what counts as impact, the power to be trusted with being tracked. Give me that platform. Build me that one platform, the one that actually points the camera upward. So now let me hand the fire to the room, and I promise you, I'm drawing to a close here. As one provocateur should. I'm not actually here to control the burn. I'm only here to start it. So I will leave you with 3 sentences, and then I promise I'll get out of your way. The first one is, we did not digitize philanthropy. We digitized the audit. Second one is, solidarity is horizontal, whilst charity is vertical. And we should watch very carefully which one the platform is quietly turning the other into. And the question really was never whether the tools are imported. The question is whether the trust is being exported. We have given on this continent for thousands of years without an app. We really have. And the question before us is not how technology will finally teach Africa to be generous. It is whether technology will let Africa stay generous on its own terms, in its own tongue, answerable at last to itself. In many ways, I say thank you, have a great session, and I hope I gave you some points of provocation. I kid you not, I'm a great person. Have a good one.